Play something meaningful, if you even can. The pianist's voice cut through the silence like a blade. His smirk was loud enough to fill the theater on its own. All eyes turned to JD Vance, standing beside the glossy black grand piano center stage, as the crowd let out a collective murmur. Half laughter, half anticipation. The moment felt like a trap, and everyone believed JD had just walked right into it. Before we go any further, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will leave you speechless. It had started as a charity event, one meant to bring the two Americas together. JD Vance had agreed to appear as a guest, not a performer. The headliner was Ethan Royce, a self-proclaimed revolutionary pianist, known as much for his left-wing politics as his talent. He had spent years mocking conservatives online, and tonight he saw his chance to humiliate one in person. The spotlight glared. The crowd leaned forward. Ethan Royce took the mic again, voice dripping with sarcasm. We keep hearing how these so-called hillbilly politicians are men of the people. Let us see if he can actually do something for the people. JD, play something that matters. JD looked at the keys, then at the crowd. For a brief second, even the camera crew hesitated, unsure if they were about to record a disaster or a miracle. People expected him to fumble, to walk off stage, to laugh it off and pass the challenge. That was the safe option. But JD Vance did not move toward safety. He pulled the stool back and sat down. His hands hovered above the keys, his expression unreadable. Somewhere in the back, someone whispered, "He is going to embarrass himself." Another voice added, "I do not think he has even played before." JD closed his eyes. The room went still. Then, he played the first note. It was not flashy. It was not showy. It was quiet, too quiet. But then the second note came, and the third, and within seconds, the entire room had changed. The music that flowed from JD Vance's hands was not polished like a concert pianist. It was not practiced to perfection, but it had something no one in that room was prepared for: soul. The first few notes drifted like smoke through the air, delicate and haunting. The audience leaned in, not because it was technically impressive, but because it felt real. JD was not just pressing keys. He was telling a story, a painful one, a forgotten one, and no one could look away. Ethan Royce stood frozen by the side curtain, his smirk fading with every chord. The melody had a slow ache to it, like something carried from a place far from theaters and red carpets. It sounded like a front porch in a town with no name, like a boy playing on an old broken piano while his mother cried quietly in the next room. The audience stopped breathing. JD's eyes stayed closed. His fingers moved like he was chasing something, maybe a memory, maybe a promise he made to someone a long time ago. In the second row, a woman wiped a tear from her cheek. She did not know why she was crying. It just hit. No one expected this. Not the crowd, not the sponsors, not even JD's own team backstage. And as the music rose into a soft crescendo, a story started unfolding through every note. It was the story of a girl, JD's friend from years ago, who had grown up in foster homes, forgotten by the world. She used to hum this melody, JD once said, when she was scared. She would hum it in shelters, in courtrooms, in bedrooms with locks on the outside. She was gone now, but the song was hers. And now 1,000 strangers were listening to her pain, her voice, her memory, through JD. By the time JD played the final note, you could hear nothing but silence. No clapping, no laughing, just silence. And when JD finally opened his eyes, even Ethan Royce was staring, his jaw slightly open, as if the ground beneath him had quietly shifted. Ethan Royce tried to laugh. He really did. A half-hearted chuckle escaped his lips as he took a slow step toward the piano. But his eyes betrayed him. They flicked toward the crowd, toward the cameras, toward the faces that were no longer looking at him with admiration, but with something else: doubt, discomfort, respect for the man he had tried to humiliate. JD stood up from the piano, calm and quiet, like nothing had happened. But the silence in the room still hadn't broken. It held there, thick and heavy, because something had just shifted, and everyone felt it. Ethan cleared his throat. Well, not bad for someone who's better known for shouting in Senate chambers. His voice cracked just a little. A few people chuckled out of pity, not amusement. It was the kind of laugh that came when you were trying to recover from a fall, but still lying on the ground. JD did not respond. He just looked Ethan in the eye and said calmly, "You asked me to play something meaningful." I did. It was a simple line, but it landed like a hammer. The pianist had asked for heart. JD had given him a story that lived in the bones of a forgotten America. And now, the man who had mocked the working class on late-night TV had nothing left to say. A voice in the audience finally broke the silence. "That was beautiful." Then another. "Play it again." And then thunderous applause erupted. Not polite clapping, real emotional shaken applause. Cameras turned toward JD, not Ethan. Reporters in the back started typing frantically, headlines already forming. "Pianist tries to mock JD Vance. Backfires live on stage." Vance silences crowd with heartbreaking melody. Ethan turned away and muttered under his breath, "You had someone coach you. You planned this." But his words were weak. He knew it was not true. Backstage, a staff member from the theater leaned toward the event organizer. "Do you know what song that was?" The organizer shook his head. It was not from any known composition. Maybe he wrote it himself. The staff member blinked. That song, it felt like it was written in a place people pretend does not exist. And in that moment, JD Vance did not look like a politician, or a lawyer, or a viral video. He looked like a man who had lived, a man who had carried grief in silence. And tonight, he had spoken it without using a single word. After the event ended, people were still standing in small circles, whispering about what they had just witnessed. Some looked shaken, others looked ashamed, and a few looked like they had just seen something they could not explain. JD Vance walked through the crowd with quiet steps. No victory pose, no press conference, just a slow, thoughtful exit. But his silence made more noise than any speech could have. Backstage, Ethan Royce sat alone in the dressing room, staring at the wall. His fingers tapped nervously against the wooden table. He had performed in front of presidents, governors, and the world's richest donors. But tonight, he had been outplayed by something he could not understand. Emotion, truth, a kind of raw pain that no training could imitate. He pulled out his phone and opened social media. His name was trending, but not the way it used to. Ethan Royce mocks JD Vance and loses. JD Vance silences political theater with one song. America heard something it forgot. He tossed the phone aside and muttered to himself, "It was just a stupid tune." But even he knew that was a lie. Outside the venue, a reporter caught up to JD as he stepped into the back alley near the service exit. "Mr. Vance, was that song prepared? Did you plan to respond like that?" JD looked at him and said softly, "I did not come here to prove anything, but I was not going to let him make people like her invisible." The reporter tilted his head. "Who is her?" JD paused, then answered, "Someone the world forgot long before the spotlight ever found me." The reporter stood frozen for a second, then slowly lowered his mic. There was nothing more to ask. A few feet away, an old janitor who had been sweeping during the whole performance looked up at JD and gave him a simple nod. JD nodded back. Because real moments do not need explanations. They just need someone brave enough to let them live. And that night in a room built for applause and power, the only thing louder than politics was a melody that spoke for those who never got a voice. The next morning, JD Vance woke up to chaos. His phone was vibrating nonstop. Messages, missed calls, interview requests, invitations from talk shows that had never mentioned his name before. He ignored most of them. He did not play for the noise. But one email stood out. It came from someone he had not heard from in years. "I do not know if you remember me. I was her social worker. I heard the song last night. Thank you for not letting her be erased." JD sat at the edge of his bed staring at that line. Something about it felt heavier than everything else. He remembered the girl's face, quiet, bruised by life, but still humming that song like it was a shield against the world. She had nothing, and yet her voice had lived on in him. Across the country, the performance had sparked something unexpected. A former teacher from Ohio wrote a blog post titled, JD Vance played the song I heard in my classroom 20 years ago. It went viral within hours. An activist who had once criticized JD's politics tweeted, I do not care who he votes for. That song last night, that was the sound of pain this country ignores. And at a community center in West Virginia, a group of teenagers who had never heard of JD Vance sat around an old radio, listening to a bootleg recording of the performance. None of them said a word until the song ended. One of them whispered, feels like someone finally told our story. Ethan Royce, meanwhile, had canceled 2 appearances. His press team released a short statement. No comment at this time. Behind the scenes, a well-known political columnist who had once mocked JD's background sent a message to his editor. We might need to take another look at him. There is something we missed. But JD was not thinking about any of that. He was sitting at his kitchen table, scribbling something on a worn-out notepad. Just a few lines, not policy, not speech, just lyrics. Because sometimes the loudest things you can say are the ones you never speak. Later that week, JD received an invitation, handwritten, not emailed. It came from a small art school in Kentucky. The note was simple. We saw the video. Our students are learning how to tell stories through music. Most of them come from nothing. Would you come play for them? He stared at the paper for a long time. It was not from a major foundation, not from a senator, just a place where kids were trying to hold on to something real. He went. When he arrived, the school was old, paint peeling, windows cracked. The piano in the auditorium was missing a key, maybe 2. But the room was full, kids with wide eyes. Some looked excited, some looked skeptical. All of them were quiet. He sat down at that broken piano. No stage lights, no cameras, no smug challenges. Just kids who wanted to feel something. He did not give a speech. He just started to play. Not the same song from that night. A new one. Rougher. Still forming. Like it had not fully found its voice yet. Just like the kids in front of him. As he played, he noticed a girl in the front row pull a notebook from her backpack and begin to draw. A boy next to her closed his eyes, rocking gently to the rhythm. Another kid, maybe 10 years old, reached out and touched the wooden edge of the piano like it was something sacred. And JD realized something. The night with Ethan Royce, that was never about humiliation. It was about a chance. For people to feel seen. For the forgotten to be remembered. For stories to be heard in places that silence usually lives. When he finished, he stood up. No applause, no headlines. Just a quiet room full of kids who understood something unspoken. One of the teachers walked up to him and asked, why do you think that song hit people so hard? JD looked around the room and answered, because it was not mine. It belonged to all of them. The teacher smiled. Will you come back? JD nodded. As long as they keep listening. And for the first time in a long time, he did not feel like a politician or a name in a headline. He felt like someone who had finally spoken without needing to say a word. That night, back in his apartment, JD sat alone with the piano again. This time, an old upright one in the corner of his living room, slightly out of tune. The city buzzed outside his window, but inside there was only quiet. He ran his fingers across the keys, not playing, just feeling the weight of them. He opened the notebook from earlier, the same one where he had been scribbling fragments of lyrics. It was filled with names, bits of stories, pieces of songs that had never been finished, forgotten voices, people he had met in coal towns, shelters, courtrooms, people who had given him pieces of themselves without knowing it. He had spent so long fighting in rooms full of power, arguing with journalists, debating policy, defending himself against people who had never seen where he came from. But this thing he had stumbled into with one melody, it was different. It reached people in a way that facts never could. Because music does not ask who you voted for. Pain does not come with a party. And healing, it does not need permission. His phone buzzed again. Another request, this time from a senator's office. Would you be willing to perform that song at the Unity Summit next month? JD stared at it. The same politicians who had ignored those small-town voices for decades now wanted to use the song to talk about bridging the divide. They wanted him to package what happened on that stage, turn it into a message, a soundbite, a brand. He put the phone down. He was not angry, just tired. Some things are not meant to be sold. He turned back to the piano, placed his hands on the keys, and started playing again. Not for cameras, not for headlines. Just to remember. He played for the girl in the shelter who used to hum through her fear. He played for the boy in the Kentucky school who tapped his fingers on the desk like it was a drum. He played for the janitor who nodded without saying a word. And as the music filled the room, JD Vance realized what had happened that night on stage was not a performance. It was a reckoning. And maybe, just maybe, it was only the beginning. The next morning, JD stood on his balcony with a coffee in hand, watching the city stir to life. Everything felt louder now. Headlines, invitations, political chatter. But inside him, there was only stillness. He had not meant to start anything, and yet something had been set in motion. Later that day, he received a package in the mail. No return address, just a worn-out envelope with his name scrawled across it in shaky handwriting. Inside was a single photograph. It was black and white, blurry. A little girl sitting at a church piano in a rundown building, hands too small to reach all the keys. She was smiling, barely. Tucked behind the photo was a note, handwritten in the same shaky script. Her name was Lily. I was her foster parent for 3 years. I saw your video. I heard the song. I do not know how, but I think you brought a piece of her back. JD sat down slowly, staring at the image. That was her. The girl he remembered humming that tune. The one who used to tap it out with chipped nails and bruised knuckles on an old cafeteria table. The melody had lived in his bones for so long, he forgot where it came from. But here she was, captured in a single photo. He held the picture gently, afraid it might fall apart in his hands. He thought about all the times her voice had been drowned out, by courts, by systems, by the noise of a country that moves too fast to remember the quiet ones. But now, she had been heard. He picked up his phone and called the school in Kentucky, the same one with the broken piano and the kids who listened like it mattered. I want to come back, he said. The teacher sounded surprised. Already? JD looked at the photo again. There is something I need to play. I think it belongs to her. That evening, he sat at his piano again. Only this time, he did not play her song. He listened, letting her voice fill the spaces between the notes. Because some stories are not meant to be told. They are meant to be remembered. And sometimes the only justice you can give to a forgotten child is to make sure her melody never disappears again. The end.